Do you like explosions? Do you like blowing things to a pulp? Are you a fan of turning everything you see to ash? Then I've got the build for you. This explosive build will turn any enemy that looks at you funny into a Michael Bay movie. Welcome to my build guide for the Ash Maker. This build focuses massively on blowing everything up and dealing ridiculously huge chunks of damage to enemies. This build works across all difficulties and can help you blitz through boss rush even on Apocalypse with very little struggle. Before we get into the build, if there are any items that you are unsure of where to acquire them from, or need any help with the item guides in general, then head over to Abbey Hour or Luna Gaming for some amazing Remnant 2 guides. And if they don't have what you're looking for, then head over to remnant2.wiki.fextralife.com for everything Remnant 2 and all the help you'll need in acquiring the items in this build. Now, with all of that said, let's get to the build. To start things off, you're going to want to put the Warden as your main archetype with the turret drone, and then Summoner as your secondary archetype with the flyer summons. The summons you get from both of these archetypes have explosive based moves, and so they'll synergize with the build well. Summoner also increases your explosive damage. The armor for this build is totally up to you, however, I use the Bandit's Mask, Bruiser Body Plate, Knotted Greaves, and Radiant Bracers, mostly for the style points. The weapons are crucial for making this build really pop. For the long gun, you want Thorn with the Detonator Mutator. Thorn innately causes explosions after a set amount of needles have hit their target. However, with Detonator equipped, this amount is going to be more than doubled, causing an even greater amount of explosions. The mod is also extremely overpowered in this build, as you can get between 20 and 30,000 damage in a single hit with enough needles, as you'll see in some of the gameplay on screen. For the handgun, you want Corrupted Nebula with the Kill Switch Mutator. The great thing about this weapons mod is that you cause 5 corrosive explosions to go off simultaneously, with each of them reaching around 2k plus damage for a total of around 10 to 12k. You can also just use this weapon to increase your damage by 10% with the corrosion. The Kill Switch Mutator is great when you're surrounded by enemies, along with just dealing a decent chunk of explosive damage when switching to the weapon. For the melee weapon, you can use whatever you want. However, I use the Dark Matter Gauntlets with the Volatile Strike Mutator, which makes my melee hits cause an explosion. This also works with the charged up beam that this melee weapon has, so it pairs beautifully. For the Relic, I use the Tranquil Heart for its innate health regen, which helps to combat against being hit by your own explosions sometimes. For the Fragments, equip the Ranged Fire, Explosive Damage, and Projectile Speed. These help to increase Thorn's potential and make it more effective against larger enemies. Now, let's get on to the meaty section. For the Amulet, you're going to want to use the Detonation Trigger. This is not only going to increase your explosive damage, but it will also scorch any enemies hit by your explosions, doing an extra 600 to 700 damage over 5 seconds. For the first ring, you want the new Burden of the Excavator. This is going to stop your explosions from hitting weak spots, but it will increase their damage by 35%. Next, you want the Blasting Cap Ring. This will simply increase your explosive damage by 15%. You then want the Burden of the Destroyer. Whilst this is going to reduce your range by 35%, you'll gain an extra 15% in damage, and since your focus is on explosions, the decrease in range doesn't really make much of a difference, if any at all. And finally, you want the Soul Link Ring. This is going to give your summons 5% lifesteal, which is extremely helpful in keeping you alive without having to use your relic too often, meaning you can save your relic for healing up your summons when they get too low, since you'll definitely be hitting them a fair bit too. Now that all the physical aspects are done, let's move on to the traits. Before we get into the traits, however, I do just want to state that I have an extra 7 points from a glitch that happened while helping people fight bosses online, so bear that in mind when allocating your points. For the traits, you'll want 10 in Kinship, 10 in Triage, 10 in Bark Skin, 10 in Amplitude, 10 in Fortify, 10 in Siphoner, 8 in Chakra, 7 in Vigor, 7 in Endurance, 5 in Insight, and 5 in Strongback. To account for the 7 extra points I have, you can remove them from both Insight and Strongback, as these two aren't massively necessary for the build. And that's it, that's the entire build. With this, you'll be turning every boss fight into that one scene from JJK where Sukuna blows up the entirety of Shibuya. This build is extremely fun to use and ridiculously powerful, so I hope you guys enjoy using it too. If you enjoyed this video, then please do leave a like and subscribe for more builds like this one. I also post a variety of other gaming content on my channel, which I highly recommend you check out. You never know, there may be something else in there that you enjoy. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and as always, stay classy guys. Peace.